Hello, everyone, and welcome to Teen Book Chats with Cranston Public Library. My name is Alyssa, and I am the Teen Librarian for Cranston Public Library. Before we begin, I just want to say, especially to all of our teens out there in Cranston, that the library misses you so much. All the librarians miss all of our patrons, and we hope that you're doing really, really well, and we cannot wait to get back to business as usual. However, if you're looking for something new to read, I do have some books that I would like to recommend in book chat. One is a science fiction by Brandon Sanderson called Skyward. So Skyward is, like I said, a science fiction book that takes place in sort of like an alternate future where people have escaped Earth and colonized a new planet, and our main character Spencer has this sort of tumultuous history where her father flew for like the kind of like the, what would it be, like the Air Force or like the Sky Force of this new world, and he's been branded a coward. He did something like totally horrible, and he was branded a coward. And so Spencer is very determined to also become a fighter pilot and clear her father's name. And she starts to figure out as she goes through like flight school that like what the story of their people and this war that they're fighting has sort of been misconstrued by their government. So it's definitely got a lot of political intrigue. It's got a lot of like really well written like scenes where they're like in like fighter jets and like flying through the sky. So if like that's your sort of thing, you'd probably really love this book. Hopefully you can see it. And it has a sequel. I actually have the physical copy of this one, called Starsight. Forgot the name of the book for a second. Called Starsight. And I haven't read this one yet, so I'm hoping it's just as good, but both of these are available in the eZone. Brandon Sanderson also writes adult novels, but this is a young adult series that he's done. First two are out, and there's going to be two more. So if you don't like to start series and have to wait for them, you might want to hold off, but if you're looking for something a little bit different, this might be for you. Alrighty, the next book that I want to book talk is the book Pet. So hopefully you can see this. It's kind of it's definitely like a different cover that I haven't seen before. It's not my favorite cover, and I don't know if I necessarily would have picked it up based on the cover alone, but this was one of my favorite reads this year. It's very it's different. It's sort of fantasy but sort of not. It takes place in this sort of like world that resembles ours but is very different. And the main character, Jam, has been told, by every adult in her life that there used to be monsters in this world. And it's not like super clear off the bat what that means, like monsters. There used to be monsters and they're all gone. And so one day, Jam's mother is painting this beautiful painting, and through this sort of like series of events, this creature sort of like climbs out of the painting like it's a portal and looks like a monster, and Jam names the monster Pet, and tells Jam that no, I am not a monster, I am here to fight monsters. And so it has this sort of like dark fairy tale-esque feeling to it, and the cover makes it look a little bit more like lighthearted. Like it's got Jam in pajamas. It's got this like purple background, but it is definitely like a dark book. It's on the shorter side, which is always a little bit fun. Sometimes I like to read books that aren't going to take me like a week to read. It's only going to take a couple days. This is definitely a good option, but be prepared. The ending was not what I was expecting. So if you like something a little different, you like something that's a little bit like fantasy, but is like has a lot of twists in it, I would definitely check out Pet. All right, what's next? Ooh, okay. Sorry for Your Loss. This is a realistic fiction novel. So, it resembles our real world. Kids go to school, parents go to work. And this is about a boy who's a senior in high school, and his name is Pup. It's not really Pup, but that's his nickname. And the reason his nickname is Pup is because he is the youngest in his family of like 6 kids, and all of his brothers and sisters are like adults with their own children. And like the kids are also spread out, that like he actually has a nephew that's like the same age as him. So he's kind of growing up in this family that he feels like kind of left behind, because like he's the last one. His parents are a little older. They've kind of like, you know, had all their kids. It's the last one in the house. And Pup just doesn't really know what he wants to do with his life. And I think that's something that especially when like you're a senior in high school, that can feel really daunting. Like if you don't know what you want to do with the rest of your life. And there's this sort of expectation that at least you'll kind of know what the next step will be. So Pup is really struggling with that. And he discovers that he really likes photography. And so kind of in this like 9th hour last year of school, he starts getting really involved in art classes and photography classes. And he befriends one of the girls in his art class, and he starts to sort of find his spot in the world. At the same time, you're sort of discovering that part of his family history revolves around the fact that one of his brothers passed away. And so it's one of those books that really explores different family relationships, grief, finding your identity, finding your friends, finding the friends that might become family. And so I loved this book. It was definitely one of those like happy, sad books. Like it had really hilarious moments in it, but then it had like really kind of dark and sad moments as well. So if that's, and it disappeared. Hold on. So if that sounds like your jam, I love this book, and I think it has a pretty cool cover too. All right. So the next book I want to book talk is a historical fiction novel. This is World War II. I love World War II historical fiction novels. So this one is called Within These Lines. And since it's going to disappear anyway, I'll put it down. So the tagline for the book is torn apart by war, held together by hope. And so this book it takes place in California, and it is told in like alternating chapters between Evelina and Taichi. And Evelina is Italian American and Taichi is Japanese American. And so they're living in California. They have kind of like a secret romance going on because they know that neither of their families would approve of them dating outside their race, but they're like really in love and they are really supportive of each other. And then Pearl Harbor happens, and Taichi ends up with his family in a Japanese internment camp. So part of the book is told through his perspective of going to the camp, and what that's like inside the camp. And then Evelina's perspective is like what it's like to try and live her life when she has this huge hole in her life now. Like her boyfriend has been sent to an internment camp, but no one in her life really knows. So she has to like pretend to be okay. And it's told through their alternating perspectives. And then there's also letters to one another. And so I think what's so interesting about this book is that there's the things that they tell each other in the letters, and then there's the things that actually happen. And it's really interesting to think about like the ways that we try to protect the people that we care about. And it was just really well written, very engrossing, like read it really, really fast. And even though it's historical fiction, there's something in the way that it's written, it almost feels like realistic fiction. So if you're not a big historical fiction reader, this might be like a good book to maybe try it out. Try historical fiction because it definitely is written in a very, very engaging way. Let's see. What's next on my list? All right, so the next book is With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo, and I love this cover. I hope I'm putting this in the right spot so you can see it. I love, 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 love this cover. Elizabeth Acevedo wrote The Poet X, so this is her follow-up novel. It's not related to The Poet X, and it's not written in verse. So The Poet X is written all in poetry. This is in prose. It looks like a traditional novel. But you could definitely tell that it was still written by the same person. It's very emotional. The characters all feel extremely real. And so Emily, who is on the cover, wants to be a chef. So she's a senior in high school. She goes to school. She has these big dreams. She's living with her grandmother, but she also has a almost 2-year-old at home. So what I really loved about this book is that it shows that teens can do really hard things. And I love that she's still a teenager. She still has friends and she still has big dreams. But she's dealing with some really heavy responsibilities. She's working part-time, she's going to school full-time, and she's taking care of her 2-year-old. And Emily I loved her so much, and I found her so full. Also, there's just like really amazing descriptions of food in the book because she wants to be a chef. So I'm always very excited when there's delicious food in a book. So I loved that one. I'm really excited for her next book. Her next book is called Clap When You Land, and I cannot wait for it. Because if it's as good as The Poet X and With the Fire and High, it's going to be good. All right, so the next book that I want to book talk is called Dragon Hoops by Jean Luen Yang. And this is a graphic novel. And Jean Luen Yang wrote American Born Chinese. He's written some other books, but that's kind of like the one that I think is the most popular that most people have read. And Dragon Hoops is an autobiographical story. So before he became a full-time comic graphic novelist, content creator, he taught math at a high school, which is kind of funny. And so this story is about his school's basketball team making it to this really big state championship. And I have to say that based on that alone, probably would have not read it. I'm not a sports person. I love graphic novels, but not a sports person. And I loved this book. It's definitely about sports, and I think because it was graphic novel format, I could get into it more. I don't always love descriptions of basketball games, but drawings of basketball games, I could get into it. But it's about the dynamics of the team. It's about what it's like to play for really high level sports. Not something I have ever encountered, and this sort of added level of pressure when you have to compete at such a young age. That's a lot. It also showed a lot of dynamics within the school between the teachers. It also wove in the history of basketball. So I learned a ton about where basketball came from, when the rules switched, this sort of racialized history of basketball. Super fascinating. And like I said, not a book I probably would have read otherwise, but I'm so glad I did. It was so interesting. And I think if you're a teenager who read the crossover maybe 3-4 years ago, and now you're in high school, you would love Dragon Hoops because it's more in depth, but really, really interesting. I really loved it. Another sports graphic novel. I say I don't like them, but then I read them and I do like them. But this one is Check Please. You might recognize this one. It started as a webcomic. And you can read a ton of it for free online. So if you really, really, really want to read it and it's checked out in the e-zone and you don't feel like putting a hold on it, you can just Google the webcomic. And it takes place in college, and it follows this hockey player, Biddy, who is also a baker. And the first one is his freshman and sophomore year of college, which is a really intense time of change. And he makes it onto the hockey team. And so it's about him and the hockey team and their friendships. And him and another one of his teammates sort of have this will they or won't they relationship. And it's just funny and sweet. And the stakes are pretty low. It's kind of just a fluffy, fun sports graphic novel. And I just think it's really drawn really cute, and the emotional heart of the book is top notch. Love that one. The second one just came out. Like I said, you can read it all for free on the webcomic. But I kind of like reading the book version. So the second one just came out. I haven't read it, but I heard it is awesome. I think Martha at the Auburn branch said that the second volume is just as good as the first. So I'm really excited to read that. Both are on the eZone. All of these books that I've mentioned so far are on the eZone if you want to read them at home. All right. What's our next one? Okay. Let Me Hear a Rhyme. This also has like a gorgeous cover. So Let Me Hear a Rhyme is Tiffany Jackson's new book. And this takes place in New York City in the 90s. So if you're really into like 90s hip hop, this is the book for you. Kind of an intense book, but beautifully written. And it is about a young boy, a young adult named Steph, who is shot and killed. And his two best friends and his sister are sort of just left totally like blindsided by his death. They have no idea what happened. They don't know who did it. There's, the police have found like tons of dead ends and they're really not sure what to do. And so kind of born out of this grief, his sister gets really fixated on trying to solve his murder. And then his two best friends find all of these cassette tapes of his rapping and him like creating like original rap content. And they get it in their head that they're going to create like an album for him posthumously. So like after he's gone, but they're going to pass it off like he's still alive. And so it was like a really fascinating look into sort of this like underground 90s hip hop scene. But then also like seeing this sort of like scheme that they've cooked up sort of like get deeper and deeper and involve more people and become really unwieldy. And I think that's like such an interesting thing that sometimes, we all make like a decision and then we realize that it has all of these like repercussions. And then sort of the hip hop album that they're trying and like persona that they're creating for Steph and his sister's like investigation into his murder sort of like end up colliding. And it's a very like emotional book. Some of the parts are really hard to read, but I think it's definitely one of those books that like you'll read it and it will stick with you. And Tiffany Jackson is just like an incredible writer. If you haven't read anything by her, if you've read like The Hate U Give or On the Come Up, I definitely would suggest this one as well as like a read-alike. And then this one I actually have in person. This is another graphic novel, kind of similar to Dragon Hoops. It's a graphic memoir, and I can actually like show you like the inside of her. And her drawings are gorgeous. I loved this book. And this is the story, it's by Robin Ha, and she immigrated from Korea to America when she was in like middle school. And so this is a YA book. It's in my young adult collection because the majority of the story is her in like middle and high school, but I think like adults would really enjoy this as well. And it's all about how art saved her life, which I think a lot of young artists can relate to. And her story of immigrating is just like her descriptions of what it was like to be in like a middle school and a high school and not be able to speak English. Like middle school and high school is hard enough when you can speak the language of those around you. And just like her finding her own voice and her own place and her own group of friends was just so beautiful, and like the art is so well done. And she talks a lot about like her love of manga. So like if you really like manga, this is not a manga. It's read like a traditional graphic novel, but I think you'd probably really enjoy it. And I also love that like she has like an art style for the book, but then she also like has a slightly different art style for like the panels that she's like drawing as her teen self. So there's like a combination of different artwork in the book. So I have the physical copy right here, but this is every book that I've mentioned is available on the eZone. If you need any help accessing the eZone, you can contact us at the library, especially a lot of times people forget their PIN number. we can reset that for you so you can get on. Also, I've heard from a lot of teens that they don't like using the eZone. I totally get it. It took me a really long time to read ebooks because I was just such a print book person. But try it out, give it a shot. You might fall in love with reading on your phone. You never know. One last thing before I go that I want to share. So this is a book that hasn't come out yet, but I was very lucky to read an advanced reader copy of it. And this is a book that comes out in May, and I'm sure we will buy it for the eZone because I loved it so much. So this is called Felix Ever After. It has a beautiful cover. And Felix Ever After is about a trans boy named Felix who lives in New York City and is going to an art school. Apparently I have this thing about like sports books and like teenagers that realize that they want to do art. But so Felix is in New York City, and he has this really interesting friend group that he's not always sure that he jives with. And I just think it is a beautiful book about self-discovery, and then also kind of realizing that like your internal perspective doesn't always match what people think of you. And sometimes we have a very clear image of what other people see us as, and that's not always accurate. It is a very intense book to read, but it has a really beautiful ending. And just like the art school background in New York City, and it's just like a fun group of teens. And I really love like the Felix at the end is very different than the Felix at the beginning of the book. Alrighty, so those are all the books that I wanted to share with you. A couple of things. I'll be back here next week, Thursday at 3 o'clock. I will be talking about middle school books next Thursday. And then the Thursday after that, Elise from the William Hall Library will be talking specifically about teen horror novels, because I'm a giant chicken and she has to read them all because I can't, because then I will never sleep again. But after that, wide open. If you have suggestions or if you want to hear us talk about a specific genre or read-alikes for something, please let us know. And we also have a personalized recommendation form on the Cranston Public Library website. So if you're looking for something to read, it'll ask you a couple of questions about your reading habits, and then one of the librarians will give you some personalized book recommendations. But thank you so much for being here. The library misses you, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day.